Welcome to episode 26 of the Landing Zone podcast. We're doing 3 episodes in conjunction with Veterans Day, and this one is really special. This one is very near and dear to my heart. My good friend Tyler Bowser is coming onto the Landing Zone. So, the Landing Zone is real veterans, real stories, no scripts, no edits, just a conversation. And we're going to see where this conversation takes us. Tyler, fellow Air Force veteran, fellow
Yeah.
brother, welcome to the
Well,
Landing
I'm
Zone.
glad to be here. It's kind of like being a reunion of an airman and his first sergeant. I've always looked up to you, Lloyd, as my first sergeant in life. And it's great to be here, man. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very kind of you to say. So, where are you originally from, Tyler?
So I was born a Navy guy. My dad was in the Navy. He was a pilot. He flew A-7s off of the JFK. And so we moved a lot when I was really young. So I was born in Jacksonville. Then we moved to Kingsville, Texas for a little while. And then my dad got out and he got a job in Saudi Arabia, is the only place that he could find a pilot's job. So we were about ready to move there, but some things happened. And my dad said, I don't want to raise my family in Saudi Arabia. So he came back and we were living in Northern California with my mom's folks. And then we finally landed in San Diego County in a town called La Costa.
So, all these Navy bases, this Navy influence. Why did you join the Air Force?
Well, that's an interesting question, and the truth goes like this: I tried to join the Navy, but I had some outstanding issues. I had been caught with a green leafy substance in my car when I was 18, and so I qualified with my ASVAB score. I had qualified to get into their nuke program, but to get into their nuke program, you also have to be able to have a TS clearance. And so I did not qualify for that particular program, but ended up about a year and a half, 2 years later, my brother was in the Air Force, and I was like, man, I've got a high enough ASVAB score that I talked to the recruiter. He's like, you can pick any job that you want, and I happened to pick satellite communications, and that's how I ended up landing into the Air Force as opposed to the Navy.
Yeah, Satcom. So I know Satcom folks very well. I was in the Talsi tanker airlift control element in Germany, and we had some Satcom folks. Interesting breed.
Yeah, we're.
Halfway.
I like to say we're a bunch of space cadets because we work in space. That's what we do. Our assets are in space. The equipment that we utilize is in space. We use the ground control portion of it, but it's really really cool to learn about space, the things that are in space, and like different things that most people don't know about what's out in space. So um, it's neat to know that for many years, since at least the late 70s and early 80s, the United States has led the way in space systems across the spectrum. So, from communication satellites and communication systems, always having the latest and greatest SATCOM capabilities, to right before they said Gorbachev and Reagan said that they wanted to eliminate Star Wars, any kind of weapons in space. Well, we had already implemented some items up there, and I'm sure they're still flying today. But I can't wait to see in the future what is up there currently that's helping to defend our country from a command and control aspect, and then all the neat things that they have up there to control space through Space Command.
Yeah, I know. I did some Star Wars support missions way back in '92.
Yeah,
So I can't imagine what's
we
out there
don't
that we don't
know.
know about, or should we know
Yeah,
about. So
yeah.
the So you had a short career, but it was a successful career, and then we're getting ready to get real here with this conversation, and Tyler was gracious enough to once again tell his story on the at the last Vetlanta summits, and it moves me every time. If for the UPSers out there, or even if you're not UPS, you can go onto this YouTube channel Yeah, I have the video. Tyler was focal point of my Jim Casey Community Service Award video, and it touches me even to this day. I remember sitting. I didn't get a chance to watch that video until the a, day before I gave the speech and was recognized. So the Jim Casey Community Service Awards, it's like a top secret thing. Like very few people, like on two hands, probably less than two hands, know who's won. And that year, our management committee meeting was in Toronto, Canada, and Suzanne, my late wife, and I got to fly up, and I did a practice run of my speech, and I watched the video. And I don't even know if you know this, Tyler. I sobbed like
Yeah,
a
you told
baby
me. Yep.
when I watched that video, and I mean to the point I got up and left the room and left Suzanne with Ed Martinez, the president of the UPS Foundation,
Wow.
and then it was so I walked behind the stage, and there was a bunch of people behind the stage. I walked out of the hotel,
Wow.
and then
Well,
compose myself and walk back. There was two things: your story and you being such a good friend, and watching you come from where you were to where you were at was touching. And then having so many people that I admired so greatly say good things about me. But let's talk. Let's get real. And I know you're comfortable with
yeah.
doing this because we've done it a lot. Let's talk a little bit about your transition. I know initially you had a good transition. I mean, you transitioned into some defense contracting, and then you were living in Houston and some oil and gas. So can you take us through that portion of the
Yeah, well,
story?
my initial transition out of the Air Force was back in 2000, right at the end of the dot-com era. You know, there was the big Y2K thing that spurred a lot of new technology companies. The internet really started to gain some traction. And so there was a lot of tech growth, and then there was the big tech bubble. Well, I had a tech skill, which was communications, last mile communications. And so I worked for a startup, and the startup lasted, I think, about 5 months before I lost my first job. And then I went to its competitor, and that lasted only about 3 more months before they imploded. And then I ended up going, well, I couldn't. I went back to an initial job offer that I had coming out of the Air Force and spoke with them at MCI WorldCom, and they're like, no, we cut the position that we were going to hire you on. So the economy went down in a big way. And so I just took a job in the logistics side, actually distributing window film. So Lumar Window Film, the largest manufacturer of window tint and films in the world, started doing that. And then 9/11 happened. And I was getting ready to go back to school. 9/11 happened. I lost that job. They closed down that warehouse. And so I was really kind of awestruck how I had this great skill set. I come out, all these tech companies that I worked for end up folding, and then I'm left. Believe it or not, I went to go work for Starbucks. And I worked for Starbucks for 4 years and worked my way up to running stores and opening new stores for them. Um, but I really lost my purpose. Like I had this amazing skill set in the Air Force that, I'm not bragging or anything like that. But when you're in the Air Force and you have a skill set, guaranteed you're going to be good at it or you're going to be kicked out of the Air Force. You're either really good at what you do or you get performanced out. You don't make it past 10 years as a senior airman because you're a poor performing airman. Everybody in my crew, they were always the best. Everybody was smart. Everybody really just worked well together and wanted each other to be the best. Now I am out in the real world, and that's not the case. You don't have that support from people that you're working with. But I did actually find it, believe it or not. I found that kind of cohesiveness with Starbucks and the culture that they kind of used to have in their stores. So, long story short, I had some really big challenges that happened in my life. I was married. I got married. As a matter of fact, I still had 2 days of active duty time before I got married. So, literally got married right at the end of my active duty tour on terminal leave. and we had this fairy tale wedding down in St. Petersburg at this beautiful big pink hotel. And then, we'd always talked about having a big family. And unfortunately, the first time that we got pregnant, she ended up having an ectopic pregnancy, and she coded out like her heart had stopped beating. She had coded out on the operating table. She had told me later that she was hovering above, watching all this happen as they were trying to repair this ectopic pregnancy inside of her. So long story short, that put a humongous strain on our relationship. It was very traumatic. And then we healed over a year or two. And then we had my daughter, Taylor Kate Bowser. Well, unfortunately, Taylor Kate was diagnosed at about, I think she was about 2.5 months old when she was diagnosed with a terminal disorder called spinal muscular atrophy. And it was a tremendous blow, obviously, to everybody to find this out when the doctor says to you, Mr. Bowser, your daughter only has, less than 18 months to live. Once it's just a classification, if they determine that you have this disease by this particular age, you have type 1, and those type 1s never lived to be, the oldest one that's ever lived to be about 18 months old. So, long story short, my daughter, Taylor Kate Bowser, lived a glorious and perfect life for 16 and a half months, and she passed away back in 2008. So, long story short, I was a wreck, and I was a train wreck of a human being. I was selling software at the time, and luckily I had kind of filled the pipeline with enough sales that I didn't have to work. And I found myself every day, I was living down in Clearwater, Florida, and I found myself every day waking up and calling into the office, telling them I'm going to go make a small deal. And then I had residuals. I didn't have to worry about working. I would head off to the bar at about noontime, have brunch with a couple mimosas, and then the next thing I knew, I was sitting on the beach with a 6-pack in a cooler, drowning my sorrows away. And my daughter passed away, and I felt just completely numb to life. So my buddy, that was an Air Force issued buddy from basic training onward. We knew each other and became friends. We were roommates when we first were junior airmen. His name is Chris Hayes. He's currently a civil service engineer working on F-16s at Acquin Air Force Base. But long story short, where was I, Lloyd?
You're drinking in
Yeah. So
Miami.
my Air Force issued brother gave me a call from Afghanistan and said, "Dude, why don't you just quit what you're doing and come out here? I need a new guy here in the shop in Afghanistan. You can just worry about the mission like you did when we were in the Air Force, and you don't have to worry about life." So I thought about it for about a split second, and I said, "Done deal." When January 1st came, I turned my keys into the company, my credit cards, and I said, "I'm so sorry, but I'm off to Afghanistan in 6 days." And I closed out all my deals. It was really tough because they were a great company to work for. At the time, the vice president came down with my boss and with my partner for my daughter's funeral. So a great company to work for. They're called Soft Mart. And long story short, I was off to Afghanistan. I worked in Afghanistan 2 tours of 16 and a half months each. So it was over the course of 2009 to 2012 that I was there. And, I experienced all the horrors that war has to offer. I've been shot at, blown up at, all the stuff. I've witnessed people that I love that took their own lives. I've been to 47 fallen comrade ceremonies. And after the 47th one, when there was 7 caskets that rolled down JW Disney Drive in Bagram, I said, I think that's enough. I've served my country well enough. It's time for me to go home. I came home after basically being under General Order Number 1. And Lloyd, I don't know if you remember this or just heard about it, but General Order Number 1 is have no fun, no drinking, no sex, no drugs, no booze, no rock and roll, no smiling, no hugs, no fun, right? And so when I came back home, I had all this money in my bank account, and I said, well, I've been restricted for the last 16 months. So I'm going to go ahead and double up on my partying for the next 8 months to equal everything out. And after about 3.5, 4 months later, landing in Houston, Texas, I was out of money, and I had spent a little over six figures in 3.5, 4 months. So
Wow.
yeah, found myself basically homeless, but I was living at the time in a rental car, and I made my way down to Houston, Texas, back to Houston, Texas, and ended up, long story short, getting a roommate, finding a place to live, and then found a job getting in the oil and gas industry, providing comms, mostly LMR radios, the handheld radios, at a lot of the oil and gas plants, and then out in the oil patch. Well, everything was good there for a while, but the price of oil took a big turn from the hundreds. It was right around 100, $105 a barrel, and then took a turn down into the 60s and 50s. And when it did that, they closed certain parts of the oil patch because they're just not receiving as much revenue as they need to. So they shut down portions of the oil patch. I ended up losing my job because we lost some big contracts. So I got a severance package and loaded up all of my stuff. And long story short, was in turmoil personally with a terrible relationship that I was in. So I just pulled the eject button, packed up everything I could that I could fit in my car, and I went on the most epic 6-month bender of all time, just basically living in my car, hopping from state to state, getting in as much trouble as possible. I landed in jail 5 times over the course of about a year in 4 different states. And it was all for stupid stuff: disorderly conduct, drunk in public, defrauding an innkeeper of less than $25, small bounce checks, just really stupid things. I take full responsibility and have owned up to all of those things. Never convicted in court of law, though. But still, I have owned up to and taken care of all of those things that have happened in my life. But I will tell you this: remember this, young men and women, your actions in the past can be held against you in the future. So act accordingly. Am I right, Lloyd?
You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. So you find yourself in
Yep.
Atlanta, and I want you to relate your probably lowest of your
Yeah.
low, but also your turning point. You're in a park.
Yeah. So I was kind of trying to be smart about stuff, living in my car, had a gym membership to be able to take showers, went back to Starbucks because I knew Starbucks and Starbucks knew me. And I was just getting ready to get promoted. And one day in walks this gentleman, and he says, "Are you Tyler Bowser?" And I said, "Yes, I am. They're here." And he said, "We're here to take the car." And I said, "What do you mean you're here to take the car? Is somebody leave a car out in the parking lot?" And he said, "No, we're here to take your car. We're repossessing it." And I was like, my heart sunk. Everything that I owned was in that car, and that car was my nightly, safe haven. I was urban camping, but without that car, I had nothing. And I hadn't made payments on that car for 6 or 7 months. So they took the car, and I stayed with a friend that next night, and then made my way down to Fort McPherson and told them the most humbling words of my entire life. Like, my name is Tyler Bowser. I'm an Air Force veteran. I've got no place to stay. I'm homeless. And they said, "All right, well, we've got an emergency bed. We'll put you down at the Gateway Center." So they put me at the Gateway Center, which is the old Atlanta City Jail. And it was not the place for me, Lloyd. Every day I had a little bit of money because I had been working at Starbucks. So I had a little bit of money in my pocket, and I would go down to 5 Points to the train station, the MARTA train station, and there's a little convenience store there. I'd get me a couple beers, and then I'd go down to the underground in Atlanta, and I'd pour those beers into a styrofoam cup, and I'd just sit there and get drunk all day long. So for 5 days, I did that. And then on the sixth day, I was at a park, and I was sitting on this park bench, and there was just bums to my right and bums to my left, and there I am drinking beer out of a paper bag. And this family is walking past me, and the mom is pushing a stroller, and she makes eye contact with me. And as I look at her, she pushes the stroller like as far away from the park bench as she possibly could. And I said to myself, I cannot go any deeper. I cannot go any lower than I am right now. And so I threw those beers away. I had a spiritual experience that all I can tell you is I didn't hear a voice. I just felt the presence of the Heavenly Father saying, son, I love you. I will be with you if you want to live under the bridge. But you have every tool at your disposal right now. Go forth and get into recovery. And so from that point forth, I had a couple stumbling blocks on the early couple of weeks, but I got into the substance abuse program over at Fort McPherson. So I was going to classes 5 days a week. I got placed over at the Veterans Empowerment Organization, which is how I met you, Lloyd. So I was going to group meetings 5 or 6 days a week there as well. And then just being held accountable to do stuff in my life to recover my life. And I remember, I'll tell you the lowest point. I remember sitting in the jail, the old jail, which was the Gateway Center, talking to my dad on the phone. And he was the last person that I had a relationship with that would talk to me. And I said, Dad, I just can't go any lower. From that point forth, though, it was a trajectory that just can only be explained, Lloyd, through God's grace. You and I were both believers, but my recovery can only be credited to something that's far beyond my ability or capacity to rebuild my life. Because between that point and a year later, I found myself at the Arthur Blank's ranch out in Montana, representing the Veterans Empowerment Organization in Vetlanta, or not Vetlanta, but with the Warrior Alliance. So
Yeah. That was amazing. I didn't even get an invite for that meeting, but so I had the honor. I got to talk about how you and I met. So Tyler was doing very well, listening to God, making the required changes in his life, uh, got sober, started to get in on the right track. I went to it was a Christmas party that VO
that's
had
right.
that year. It was in one of the real nice buildings downtown, one of the skyscrapers, and so I go and um, I know I was putting in like crazy hours and was exhausted but wanted to go. And again, I think it was God connecting me and you, and so ended up going. You gave a presentation, and then we got on the elevator, and at the time UPS still had like old
Oh yeah.
Blackberries. So I'm like I got my little old Blackberry, and then Tyler pulls out because he's a geek. He's a geek at heart. He pulls out the biggest iPhone I've ever seen. It was like 5 times the size of my Blackberry, and I looked at him and my sense of humor. I was like, dang, maybe I should try being homeless. And then I mean and you and I bonded right
Yeah,
there, and I think it was off to the races. We've been such great friends since then, and honestly, it has been pretty spectacular watching you. I'm honored whenever you call me and ask for advice,
yeah,
and talk a little bit about what's gone on in your life since that low point. You went to go work for Veterans
that's
Empowerment
right. That's
Organization for a
right.
while.
So I was sitting. I remember I was sitting on the one of the park benches. You remember, Lloyd? They had a really cool basketball area back at VEO, so people could do a little bit of workouts and shoot some hoops. So I'm sitting there just chilling out, and Franz Fortune, the executive director at the time, he came and he grabbed me and said, "Hey, can you come share your story with the board of directors?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." I had been there for probably 2.5, 3 months maybe. And so I go upstairs, I share my story, and then I share my experience of what it's like being here at VEO. I was very grateful for everything that was being given to me. I was out of the elements. I was getting fed 3 times a day. I was in recovery, so I was going to meetings with other men on the campus to get to know them. So things were going pretty well. Um, After that, the next day, Franz came down and he grabbed me and he said, "Hey, man, if I buy you some suits, will you go out with the United Way and go on this campaign with the Rollins Corporation?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do that." He goes, "I'll pay you a little stipend." So I got $200 a week. And then I got moved into staff housing, which was a really, really big deal. I had my own room now. I'm making $200 a week. Things are like really changing for me. I used to walk, then I took MARTA, and then I had enough money to buy like a little scooter. Lloyd, did you know my little scooter, red scooter? Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
I remember that.
and then went out on this campaign with the Rollins Corporation. They had adopted VEO and allowed us to go to like 20 different Orkin locations and basically pitch VEO for them to give through the United Way, but to give specifically for the VEO. And we raised a boatload of money. But 4 years later, in 2020, so that started in 2016 to 2020, I worked at VEO and raised about $4.5 million. Helped to create some really substantial relationships with the Blank Foundation, with Home Depot, with Lockheed Martin, with Delta, a lot of the Fortune 500 companies, and then obviously we kind of became a poster child for Vetlanta for a while. You know, there was this great synergy and relationship with Vetlanta and VEO, and you guys coming down every Christmas to go ahead and feed everybody breakfast. I just remember is such a remarkable way to do service work and stuff. So after that, though, I had, for political reasons, I had had my fill, and 4 years in the nonprofit grinder anywhere is enough for somebody to say, I need a refresh. So I wanted to go work for myself. I really got into aerial imagery and doing drone work. I started a drone program for my buddy's roofing company. So to teach the folks that were doing the inspections how to do a drone inspection as opposed to climbing on the roof. Much higher liability of somebody getting hurt, much higher liability for the homeowner and the insurance company that's out there. So help them reduce costs and to increase accuracy, and loved it, but I just couldn't make enough money off of it. So I decided to go back into consulting nonprofit. I worked for about 6 months with an organization called Operation Rally Point out in Monroe, Georgia. They're thriving. They are a grassroots, down in the trenches with the homeless veterans, putting them into hotels and helping them get the trajectory out of homelessness and back into self-sufficiency. They're doing all that work on the east side, and we're trying to do it over here with United Military Care on the west side. And then we've got Jim up on the north side with Cherokee County Homeless Veteran Coalition, and then VEO is our bedrock down in the city. So we've got more capacity coming online, Lloyd, which I'm really, really excited about. But I have been working for the last year and a half at Connecting Cobb Veterans, which is another grassroots, came from an idea about 4 years ago, and was a question from Judge Reuben Green, who was a judge here, who's a former enlisted Marine. And he said, why are all these nonprofits here in Cobb County that have veteran in their name, why are they not providing services, and why are veterans falling through the cracks? So a big database was gathered, and we decided to take the lead and try and be that focal point where veterans can call us and we can help directly connect them with the service provider that they need. So that was the theory. And then we implemented it and started doing processes and procedures and saw the need for emergency lodging. And then we launched with a $5,000 grant from the Brain Trust down in Atlanta. We started a new emergency lodging program. The day that veterans identify as being homeless, we can get them into housing if we have dollars available. And we have grown that, Lloyd. We grew that in a year from $5,000 to over $125,000 for that program. We've given over 650 nights of hotel stays to over 70 different veteran family groups. And we are so stoked to be able to say those are huge numbers to come from a little tiny nonprofit like us.
Yeah, it's a small one. So, how are our viewers? How can they find out more? How can they give to your organization?
Well, you can go online to cobbcollaborative.org. We are a premier program currently of Cobb Collaborative. Cobb Collaborative has been around for 25 years. They have three great pillars. One of them is literacy. So they're big into the schools and pushing literacy and making sure that books are in the hands of children. And then the second is community engagement, which is where we fall. We want to engage the 40,000 veterans. Lloyd, did you know there's 40,000 veterans here in Cobb County? Isn't that awesome?
Yeah,
and then the third one is mental health. We want to make sure that our veterans, I'm somebody that I struggle from mental health challenges myself. I have bipolar disorder with super severe depressions. And then I also deal with substance abuse disorder that I'm currently in remission from and not participating in. Staying sober is key for me, but maintaining my mental health fitness, that is super key for me too, because if I'm not maintaining my own mental health fitness, everything else in life will fall into disorder, if you know what I'm saying.
So let's talk a little bit about some of your techniques you use. I mean, one of the big ones, and it's me and you,
Yeah.
is the Wingman or Buddy
That's right.
program. Like check in with your buddy. How important is that
Oh,
for
it's
you?
huge. I have a really big bullpen of men. So I've probably got 6 or 7 men from church. I've probably got 4 or 5 men from business, like you, Lloyd. You fall into that. And then I just have some military friends. And each one of those groups offers like a different view of a 360 degree. If I look at a challenge as a globe and I get an entire view, and I can have people that can see it from different angles, really give me some positive feedback, and I see what the common thread is there, I can start to work through those problems. So I'm big about making sure that I'm reaching out to people when I'm going through a challenge, and I want them to make sure that they're doing the same thing. If they have something big and gnarly that's going on in their lives that's burdening them, they can call me and we can work through it together.
One of the ones we talked about yesterday was a new one for you that is paying dividends is Acquin Therapy.
That's right. I just did that this morning. Just being out on a horse, trotting around an arena and getting into a groove with a horse where you're truly in a rhythm, taking care of the horse, doing the horse care before and after is super, super important. And then just starting my day off, Lloyd, in complete serenity, on a couple hundred acres in North Paulding County, surrounded by horse fields and horses and other people that love horses. It has been tremendous for me, and I look forward to it, and it relieves me of a great deal of anxiety.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the great things going on in your life, because you do have some great things. We talked about Christ. We talked about your purpose in the veteran and community work. You got remarried and have kids.
That's right. I'm really super privileged and blessed. Lloyd actually was at my wedding, which was a little over 5.5 years ago, and I have 2 great stepkids that I've got to see them. I've known both of them for more than half of their life now, so that's pretty amazing. And I've got to see both of them just transform, like, completely. My stepson, he is growing tremendously right now. He's in this growth spurt, so to see him. But the more important thing is to see that he loves Jesus, number one, and that he is well disciplined. And compared to the heathen child that I was, Lloyd, he's an angel. So And then same with my stepdaughter, and we share this kind of love and passion for horses. She rides horses, so she's she was the inspiration for me to start riding.
Yeah, very cool. So proud of you,
Thanks,
brother.
man.
I mean, to see the growth. Keep it up. And then, as always, if you need to talk, I'm here
Yeah,
for you 24/7.
appreciate it, bro.
So, yeah, with that, this is a Veterans Day podcast. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to close it out with a Veterans Day message to the
Yeah,
viewers.
I just want to let all of the generations of veterans. We still have World War II vets that are out there. Our post World War II folks that worked in the Panama Canal. I know one particular one that's at my VFW. Our Korean War veterans, our beautiful brothers and sisters that were in the Vietnam conflict. We're glad that you're home. We love you. We give you so much respect. Our generation, Generation X, that has served proudly on the battlefield. Lloyd, Generation X served for 20 years on the battlefield. And so we give you much respect, and we are glad that all of our brothers and sisters are home. This is a time to honor and celebrate each other, and to allow others to honor you as well. Folks, if you're out there and you want to honor somebody and you're at a bar, buy that veteran a beer, buy them a pack of smokes, give them a roll of dip, but take care of that veteran if you want to. And thank you to the community, because there's so many different organizations and companies out there that do spectacular things for veterans on Veterans Day. So thank you to the community that does that. To all my veteran brothers and sisters, till Valhalla for the ones that we've lost. We will honor them on Memorial Day, and we will celebrate you and I on Veterans Day.
Well said,
Yeah,
my friend. Thank you for what you do. Happy Veterans Day. And with that, I'm going to leave it with my standard closing.
amen.
Be safe, be kind, and be remarkable.
Outstanding. Take care, Lloyd.